right, hello folks. It's Monday, so it must be another episode of James Schreier and myself streaming. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, everyone. So I saw something interesting on Hacker News because even though I hate the quality of the discussion there, I still, am always looking for interesting ideas.
Yes.
There are often a lot of interesting links focused there. Although this time, what sort of got my underwear in a twist was the conversation around what is fair in terms of pay. There was somebody who had posted saying very proudly that, I need to see life-changing amounts of money before I put more than 20% of my full effort into this job. And the thing is I've seen people with that kind of attitude before. This sort of, well, if I'm not being paid as much as I want, not as much as everybody else is, or not what's fair, but if I'm not paid life-changing amounts of money, and this was the actual quote, if I'm not being paid life-changing amounts of money, then you're not going to get my best work and you don't deserve my best work. Wow. And this brought to mind extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation.
Yes.
So I take it you're familiar with those terms.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and that's, I mean, there have been studies about that, and one of the things, so I know there's a little bit of a tangent, but one of the things I've looked out for over the past year is replication studies for some of this stuff. Because, things that like Khan wrote about in Thinking Fast and Slow, things that Daniel Pink has wrote about, which, he talks about motivation as well. Some of those studies haven't held up in replication. So anyway, that was
especially Thinking Fast and Slow. Yeah. I understand had some problems with replication. So before Daniel Pink talked about extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation, I think he sort of boiled it down into autonomy, mastery, and purpose was sort of his thing, and I think he's done a great job of communicating about it. Before Daniel Pink, there's somebody named Alfie Kohn who's very passionate about this.
Yes.
And he has a book I read years ago called Punished by Rewards.
Yep, me too.
And it talks about, extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation. And you're absolutely right. Psychology in general has a replication problem, more so than I think the entire scientific industry has got a replication problem. But
us humans especially.
Anything sociological, anything where you can't really do something repeatable, it's a problem. So it could be that my understanding of what works is based on outdated information, but it certainly rings true to me that when I look at what my most enjoyable work has been, and when I look at the most successful teams I've seen, it's not been the people who are receiving or asking for life-changing amounts of money. Right. I'm not, and the problem, I need to be careful here because I posted on this thread, and I would say a good 80% of the wankers on Hacker News, the fine people on Hacker News, immediately assumed that what I meant was, so what you're saying is I just need to shut up and work hard and everything's going to go my way and you can pay me pennies. That's not what this is about.
And that's not good either. I know people who are sorely underpaid. I remember when I was dev manager, I was really pushing for people to be we need to give them, not just a few percent, but substantial, 20% to get them to where they should be kind of thing, because.
Yeah, it's not just about what's fair. I think there is a fundamental fairness thing here. You don't want to pay people dramatically less than the market rate because it's not fair. They will find out and they will leave. But even that is intrinsic motivation is this innate desire. So we haven't really defined terms.
Go ahead.
Intrinsic motivation is doing something because you find it meaningful to do for reasons other than rewards or punishments. You're not doing it because you're paid. You're not doing it because you're going to get fired. You're doing it because you love to do it in some way. And that doesn't mean necessarily changing the world. It means that maybe you just love the work, or you love the people you're working with, or you find it an interesting challenge. There's all kinds of different kinds of intrinsic motivation. And I believe it's not possible to create intrinsic motivation, but I do think it's possible to destroy intrinsic motivation.
Yes. Yes.
And one of the ways you destroy intrinsic motivation is by treating people unfairly.
Mm-hmm.
And that especially goes for pay.
Mm-hmm.
So this does not mean pay people pennies. What it means is that you're going to see the best work from people if you're getting rid of the things that get in the way of their love of the work, like unnecessary meetings and ridiculous deadlines and unequal pay and jerk coworkers.
Right. And arbitrary rules and
and lack of control over your
lack
work.
of control. Yeah. And that goes into the autonomy stuff that Daniel Pink talks about, which I think is so important, especially for, well, I think it's important for everybody, but when there can be autonomy, right? Not everything, not all work you can do sort of, and autonomy is also a tricky factor. Like, does autonomy mean I want to code, have heads down in my own, office with a door closed if such things still existed, and you don't bother me? It's like, well,
that's not great either.
That's not great either. But some people interpret autonomy as I want to be able to do whatever I want, and it's like but like still having control over the things that I think are reasonable to have control over.
I firmly believe that the best work is created by teams, not individuals. And a team is not 5 people working on the same thing.
Right.
It's 5 people working together on the same thing.
Yes.
Who are dependent on each other to be successful.
Yeah.
I see so many so-called teams that are actually 5 one-person teams.
Yeah. It's a group, not a team. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a group, not a team.
Yeah.
And there's people on those teams who think that their job is to take tickets and complete tickets, and that's it.
Right.
But of course, if that's what you're doing, then nobody's taking responsibility for getting the work that matters to the user or to the customer or to the business actually done.
Yeah.
They're actually letting go of their autonomy by saying, well, that's not my problem.
Right.
That's the problem of the person who's giving me tickets.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of a soul-crushing way to work, to be a ticket factory.
Yeah. I mean, some people, it's like, I'm just, punching the clock and I'll come in, I'll do the minimal amount of stuff, but I can't imagine that they're enjoying it. They might enjoy stuff in pieces, like, a puzzle to solve, but it's like, okay, next puzzle to solve, next puzzle to solve, next puzzle to solve, with no connection to the meaning, like you said, the meaning of that work.
Well, I think that's where burnout comes from.
Yeah.
Like the people who were commenting on this thread, like I said, it was about 80% wankers and 20% people who were reasonable. And the ones who were like deliberately taking offense, they also sounded really burned out.
Yeah.
They were the ones saying that, no, I'm not here to work on your stuff. I don't care about anything. I just give me money and then I go home and I do the least possible. And there were other people on the thread saying that sounds like a terrible way to work. Like, I can't imagine working that way because I enjoy my work, right? I would hate working in that kind of environment. And still others saying, yeah, I work with people who have that attitude and they're miserable to work with, because you can tell when somebody's, just there in a transactional way.
Yeah.
And and once again, I'm not saying that you should not receive fair pay for good work.
Right.
And that means, market rate or better. But it turns out that doing it just for the money is kind of a hard way to live.
Yeah, it's very like you said, you use the word transactional. It's very transactional, and I think that's a terrible way to live as a human.
It is,
because I'm reading this book among the 6 or 7 books that I'm currently reading, because that's the way I read, and nonfiction. Forget about the fiction stuff. They basically talk. It's I forget the full title, but something about anti-capitalist. And one of the things they talk about is sort of this idea of freedom versus community. And like some people take freedom as like sort of anarchy, like I'll do whatever I want. It's like, well, no, but there, ultimately things you do have effect on other people, as well as though like and I'm also listening to this podcast, Hidden Brain, where the one I was listening to today was about, sort of kindness and helping others, and reasons why we don't, and because we don't really truly understand the impact of kindness, like saying, I really enjoy pairing with you, James, on this, is something that, those kinds of things we don't tend to say enough, because we feel like, it's just words, right? Or it's just a sentence. But like the impact that it has on other people, we don't understand that, and that we're humans and we live and thrive on that. And so community, yes, that means there's sort of obligations or limits to what we can do, but it does mean that we're not burned out, because we can actually rely on other people. And sort of what I love about the ensembles is like, it's not just up to me to get this thing done. It's up to everybody, and I can walk out and take a breather. I can go pick up my kid from the doctor, whatever it is I have to do to like, I can feel like it's not all on me, that I'm not carrying all the weight, that we're sharing that weight. And that's what it feels like if you actually are part of a team as opposed to a group of individuals.
Yeah. Pellet writes in the comments that they used to joke they'd sell their happiness for another 10K a year in pay, and then tried it and didn't find that to be a good bargain. I'm fortunate in that I'm an independent consultant. I've been working independently for 23 years. But several years ago, I found myself not getting as many contracts as I wanted, and taking some that were really good pay, but I was letting down some of my standards about which kinds of clients I would accept. And one of the things I do in my work is I vet the client to make sure that they are capable of working the way that I think is going to be effective. And for this year, I didn't. And yeah, I made good money that year. But would I do that again if I had a choice?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
No, I would not. I mean, I think that if somebody were to dangle like $1 million in front of me and say, suck it up and do this for a year for $1 million, I'd probably take that deal. Like, everybody's got a price, right? I wouldn't mind having an extra $1 million sitting around. But I'm pretty sure I'd be pretty unhappy with it, and I'd probably have to go detox for a while afterwards. And I certainly couldn't keep it up day in, day out for a long time, unless it was good work.
Right. Yeah. And that was the reason I left Apple. Like, the money was great.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was good money. But it was soul crushing because of the environment of what I call rampant secrecy, where everything was secret, even stuff that didn't need to be. And so there wasn't a lot of sharing. There's a lot of politics. Pretty much Eddie Q drove everything. He was the head of VP of sort of internet, which almost everything that I touched fell under. And it was just like, I was like, all right, let me last at least a year, and I got to like 16 months, and I'm like, forget this. And and it was I was just I remember coming home and feeling like, what's the point of doing this? Like, I'm not able to be the person, some people, I know there was some other conversations, I forget where, about sort of bring your whole self to work. It's like, okay, you're not like bring yourself naked to work, but like feel like you don't have to put on a mask. You don't have to walk on eggshells. And I think that also leads to burnout of sort of not being able to be genuine. Yeah.
Jay asks in the chat, actually, I was going to comment on something you said. My first thought was, well, a lot of these things that destroy intrinsic motivation, a lot of the things that makes work kind of hellish to work at, is not necessarily property of the whole company. In a big company, it's more property of the people who you work for and who they work for, but not necessarily who everybody works for. Yeah. But that culture of secrecy at Apple is kind of ingrained.
Yeah.
That's systemic. That's something you're going to find everywhere.
Yeah.
But Jay asked about the vetting process I use. It's in the book. It's in chapter. What is the chapter? Chapter 4, Invest in Agility. It's got all these things that says, what do you need to have in place before you can do agile stuff, or really extreme programming, because that's what the book is about. And I basically go through and I ask those questions. And if enough of the answers to those are, no, we don't do that, and we could never do that, I say, you're not ready to work with me.
Yeah, that was one thing I learned about sort of accepting clients. Is like I've turned clients down because like you don't get it. What you're asking for is strange. What you're, you know, the way you're the structured is, you know, you can tell by just like, you know, and that's why like that sort of first meeting, that first session, it really is an interview of like, you know, the same way I looked at developer interviews as being a two-way process. It's like, great, you want to check me out, but I'm checking you out.
Yeah.
I'm seeing if like, you know, are you know, how do you handle mistakes? How do you handle the team and things like that?
I mean, for me, so I do a lot of sort of high-end consulting work. I work with VPs and CTOs and CPOs, chief product officers, and in smaller companies with between 200 and 1,000 people, or maybe a couple thousand people. And for me, the most important part of the engagement is the part before the proposal is signed, where we establish our expectations about what we want to accomplish and how it's going to be accomplished. And during that time, it's really, am I able to help you? And then on the bigger jobs, I also go through and I talk to all the people I'm going to be working with and saying, this is what we're going to do. Are you on board with this?
Yeah.
I did that once at a well-known company here in the Portland area, and heard back, no, we do not. We want a veto. We don't think this is going to be successful. And I said, okay, then it's not going to happen.
Wow.
Why?
Wow.
And they said, yeah, our managers aren't going to let this happen. And so I went to the managers. I said, sorry, we can't help you. Or I can't help you on this team. And this team, it can help you. And subsequent interactions with them made me realize that I had really dodged a bullet by asking that question. Because it was, you know, all the sort of big company politics stuff that you hear about was going on there.
Yeah, definitely experienced that.
So should we do some programming?
Yeah, let's do some coding.
Yeah, Jay, you really have to ask a team permission to coach. That's because if you don't give them permission to say no, you're not going to get their yes either. By giving them permission to say no, you get the chance to come back later when it's hard, because it always gets hard in the middle. Say, hey, you said you were going to agree to this. And
Right.
I also say, can I have your permission to do this by the book? Literally in my case, for 6 months is what I ask for. And I say, on this date, on this time, let's schedule a meeting right now. We'll evaluate and decide whether to continue doing it. And I very rarely get a no to that. It has happened at that, like I said, at that one company. But usually people are like, oh, well, let's talk about what exactly are we talking about here? And they really get into it. And they say, most of the time they say yes. And that creates the space to be successful.
Yeah, that's the autonomy thing. It's like feeling, you know, letting people feel like they have control, that they can, and a part of having control is the ability to say no.
Yeah, a huge amount of my coaching and consulting work is really about, hey, Astrid, is really about treating people with respect and making them part of the decisions.
Yes.
And that's not saying that we do whatever they want.
Right. Going back to the autonomy, there are obligations. Like you can't do whatever you want. You can't, you know, work only 2 hours a week if we're paying you for full time. Like,
well, even more than that,
you know,
because when I'm coaching a team, we're doing test-driven development,
Right.
We're doing pairing or mobbing, we're doing real continuous integration. Like we're working hard. We're doing evolutionary design, and I'm teaching a lot of things that people haven't seen before.
Right.
So, and these are, you know, I ask permission. Can we do this by the book? But then when it comes down to it, I say, no, this is what by the book looks like. And yes, we're doing this so you have the chance to evaluate it. But before you can evaluate it, you have to know what it's really like. Exactly. Doing it halfway is not going to give you, it's not going to work. And that's going to give you a skewed understanding of how well this works.
Yeah, and I do a lot of ensembles. And in the ensemble, I'll say, look, we're here in the ensemble to learn, because most of the ensembles I do are very much focused around learning. So very much sort of learning hour, learning 3 hours. And it's like, look, you're here because you want to learn. That's presumably, otherwise you wouldn't show up. You didn't have to show up. You showed up. So let's do this way. Doesn't happen often, but I'll sometimes have to sort of, okay, you went off over here, but we said we were going to do it this way. Let's try it this way and see how that feels. Hey, Sweegie. Oh, wow, 9 months. Thanks for the sub. Appreciate it.
Yeah, your sub's about to be, or your channel is about to be born, Ted. Well, good evening, everybody, or afternoon, or whatever. I brought my favorite mug, Ted. I brought my Dungeon Master mug.
DM mug, nice, very nice.
So, how's that for a smooth segue?
Yeah, beautiful. Perfect.
So when we left off, actually I love this mug so much that it broke, and so I got an identical. I got the same one again.
Oh, you didn't put the other one back together with gold filling?
I thought about it because that's really cool, but I have no idea how to do that.
Yeah,
and if I recall, it broke in kind of a weird way, and it was not really repairable, like the handle or something like that fell off. So yeah, when we left off, we were in the back end. We were working on the on our infrastructure pieces, specifically the JSON HTTP client. And the reason we were doing that was so that we could finish our OpenAI client and have it return back to the user. And let's put this over here. What was that? So yeah, we've got this sending the prompt to the OpenAI client, or through the OpenAI client to the actual service. But we're not parsing the responses yet. And last time what we did was we built the JSON HTTP client's ability to test that sort of thing. And I think we're now ready to actually make it work inside of OpenAI client.
Yeah, what happened? Was that read before, or?
It was not. And I thought I accidentally. Oh yeah, I accidentally pressed the button. I thought I undid that, but it came back.
Okay.
It looks like I brought up a breakpoint as well somehow. I'm also wondering, because Java is a little more file heavy than JavaScript. Normally, I just put all my infrastructure wrappers in a single folder until I get so many of them that it makes sense to split them out. But since we have things like JSON HTTP client and JSON HTTP REST, which are both about the HTTP client, and we have OpenAI client and prompt body, which are both about the OpenAI client, does it make sense to split them up and move them into separate packages?
Probably at some point. I can definitely see, like, yeah, there's clearly two different things. Would I split them into packages at this point? I probably wouldn't. But I also wouldn't be averse to saying, okay, this is just sort of raw HTTP. This is more, the OpenAI.
I think the main thing that bugs me about it is that prompt body is not obviously associated with OpenAI client.
Right.
So maybe what we want to do is rename that to be OpenAI prompt body. Yeah, but let's not do that yet, because I think when we do the response, we're going to end up creating another one.
That's where I was thinking. Like, at that point, we might want to create the package. Just because we'll have 3.
Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the phrase ravioli code, right?
Yes.
As the opposite of spaghetti code. And I think there's some truth to it, like having things broken up so finely that you can't really find anything because it's, spread out over a million different places. So how should we get started on this?
Well, what do our tests say? Are all our tests passing?
I think all of our tests passing, but that's a good question. Why don't you run them?
Go ahead and run.
Well, I haven't pulled from the repo for a while. You haven't checked anything.
I haven't checked anything. No.
I did figure out over the break how to get the front end code to do use source maps to translate the stack traces. So now when we have an error in the front end tests, the the stack trace will show what is in our code rather than what's in the compiled code.
Good.
But unfortunately, the library I found to do that, called source map support, has serious performance issues, and was introducing some sort of garbage collection hitch or something into the test run.
That's too bad.
Oh, so it's not working.
So what have we got? Looks like we have not configured the null. So we did a create null, but it didn't have a default configuration.
Yeah. Suiji, that was the next step, actually. Yeah. So source map support uses the Chrome V8 API, which Node.js uses V8 as well, to actually hook into whenever an exception is created. You can read all the source information. And then it uses a library from Mozilla called source map to convert that information with a source map. But I think what's happening is that because this is running every time an exception is thrown, it's just really slow. And what I can do is, rather than hooking into every exception throwing, I can just say, look, if a test fails, then look at the stack trace and use this Mozilla's source map library to do it. So yeah, I'm going to write my own, because that's very on brand.
Yes,
right?
That's very on brand. That's why I'm chuckling, because it's like that's totally James. Hey, Shirley Pancakes. No. Well, yes, unless James, if James gets too unhappy with the lack of speed for OpenAI, then yes, that will be.
It's all about this. It's all about the dev
speed
feedback loop. You know that thread on Hacker News I was talking about that came up in the response to this article about developer experience, which was saying, and I've only skimmed it, but I've saved the link to like really study later on. It's basically saying feedback loops were one of the sources of developer experience satisfaction. And of course, poor developer experience is where you get this lack of intrinsic motivation,
right.
Or the destruction of intrinsic motivation. Yeah. So yeah, feedback loops are important. I don't care how fast OpenAI is, because that's not a part of our.
It's not a part of it. Yeah, we're trying to keep it out of our feedback loop by using our nullable. Exactly. As I bring it back to the code.
Thank you for that. Nice. Another smooth segue today.
So we don't have default. So this is basically complaining because in our test we create a null.
So this
but we don't have a default.
This bothers me in a really serious way, because we broke this last episode and didn't notice.
We broke it without realizing it.
We integrated.
Did we? And we didn't realize it? Oh, that's bad. Did we not run the test?
Well, we were running the test. So this is my problem with the way Java testing works. Is by default you just run a particular class, right?
So actually that's not true. So what I did was I set it up so that the current run configuration runs all in the back end. And for me, generally, I may just subdivide the test, but if I'm running non-IO tests, which these are, I'm running all of them all the time, because the overhead is the startup of the JVM, not running the other tests. So yes, it's very easy to sort of accidentally or maybe even intentionally run just the ones in the current class or just the current test. But that's why I set it up so that I have a configuration that runs all the tests. And then you just hit Control R and it runs those tests. But I think maybe I didn't notice that we weren't running all the tests all the time.
I think that's what happened last time.
Because I'm so used to that as being the standard, I probably didn't notice it. Hey there, G Showerwicker. Oh, thanks for the sub. Appreciate that.
I think that's what happened is we were just running the JSON HTTP client tests. Yeah. By the way, you know how I told you once upon a time, maybe not on stream, that I thought we could do better than the Java test than IntelliJ does on test speeds. One of the tricks I pull out of my back pocket for making the build faster, I haven't needed it yet in JavaScript, but it's sort of in my mind, is if you're using a watch script like I am for the front end, what you can do is it can run the test and then it can spin up the execution environment for the next run. And depending on the environment you're in, you can tell it to not actually load the classes yet, but just spin up the environment. And then if you have a test runner, which might require you to write your own, if you have a test runner that can receive a signal on a socket or something like that that says now go, it can be all queued up and ready to go and save you that 1/10 of a second or 1/3 of a second or 1/2 a second, whatever it is, to get going. I don't know if the existing Java testing tools already have that built in. It's sort of, it's kind of an obvious trick, but one that most folks don't use because they think 5 seconds is a fast test run. So saving 1/3 of a second isn't a big deal.
So one thing I found is a while back, years and years ago, I used a plugin called Infinitest. And then I thought it had sort of, when I looked at it a few years ago, it's like, oh, it looked like it was unmaintained. But I recently discovered that actually it seems to be active. And I basically installed it in my IntelliJ. And so that's something we might want to check out. Maybe not today, but maybe for next time, check it out, because what it does is every time you make a change, it's always running the tests. And so that might be something we want to try out next time.
I kind of want to hook the tests into my build script so that, because the integration script runs the build, so that we don't have the mistake that happened last time where we didn't run all the tests and we integrated without realizing it.
And so that's where sort of a Git hook, where a pre-commit Git hook to make sure that all the tests pass is something that might be useful.
I don't usually use Git hooks. I'm not saying they're bad. It's just having the script and then running it manually is typically good enough for me, because it's pretty easy to establish that habit of running the script. And also I use a script to do the integration, right? So you can very easily put that as part of the script. But to get back to this, so the reason this is failing now is because I'm reasonably certain is that because last time we set it up so that you could configure the responses for posts, and it's running out of responses when we don't set them up.
So I thought we had tests for, so what do we have for post for, let's see, so null post for unconfigured endpoint. Oops.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the error we're getting.
Yeah,
you see line 36 there. So this is very easy for us to configure.
So we want this behavior. It's just we didn't configure it in the OpenAI client test.
Well, I don't know that we do want this behavior.
Yeah, that's
one of my rules of thumb for nullables is that if you create a nullable with nothing, with no configuration, it should work by default. Right.
That's kind of what I thought.
Yeah. So what we have here is we're sending a prompt to the OpenAI, and we don't actually care what response comes back. It doesn't matter in this case.
Yeah, I mean, we're not really, all we care is that, what do we care about? So this is just checking that the request was sent. This test isn't checking anything about the response yet.
We're checking the headers, we're checking the body. But what we are going to do is we're going to parse the response. So we can't just return any arbitrary response. We actually do have to return a real response. Otherwise the parsing code will fail.
Right.
So, yeah, I think there's no point in adding a default to JSON HTTP client because it's not possible for it to
know what's correct. Yeah.
So yeah, let's just go ahead and set up our default here. And then what will happen is when we make OpenAI client nullable, then we'll have it have a meaningful default when it's created with nothing.
So that brings up an interesting question. How do we document this decision? Right. We're actively making a decision saying it makes no sense to have a default value for a nullable. We've got to test that. But even when we had that, we weren't quite clear that we had made that as an active decision.
That's a good question.
So my tendency would just be put a comment in the test saying sort of the why about why we're expecting this exception to be thrown, that this is what we want because the thing that's going to parse the response is sort of not in this context.
Yeah. Although nullables typically have a
useful default.
That's not possible for JSON HTTP client because the response is always
context specific.
Yeah, I think that's good enough. Or would you just use the same comment again?
Yeah, I'd probably copy paste the comment. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're good on the JSON HTTP client.
Yep.
Let's go ahead and fix that test failure, which is that we have to configure this response, but we don't actually care what the response is in this case yet.
Right.
So if we just want to make this pass, we need to, up here in the JSON HTTP client, we need to say map.of v1 at completions. Completions, is that it?
Completions, yes.
And then say null there.
Is that going to be, oh, so that's, I mean, sure.
We're going to, as soon as we start doing the parsing of the response, we're going to have to fix that.
Right.
No, it doesn't like that.
Didn't like, yeah, I need the value needs to be not null. Yeah, we can just do object. So something else I might do is, since it can be anything, is
I like that better.
Yeah.
Yeah. But we're still getting a not configured.
Do we have to define the whole URL? Because you just put in the path.
I think it might be the whole URL.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So let's grab. Let's try that. Yep, that did it.
Okay. Should we check that in?
Let's check that in, yes.
OpenAI. That work for you?
Yep.
Okay. So now we can finally write a test along the lines of Parse's OpenAI response.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that one,
hold on.
Now we're going to have to start.
Sorry, I think we have a stray closing brace down here.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
We already have Parse's response from OpenAI right down here.
Oh, right there.
Well, we'll come back to that. So before I write this, I want to factor this out. But actually, I want to introduce a constant. How can I do that?
Command Option C for constant.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, I think this is OpenAI endpoint. What this is.
And so you didn't check the checkbox to say replace all occurrences. That's why it didn't replace that one.
Oh,
oops. You can leave it or just no for next time. That's why I prefer in IntelliJ the modal dialogues for the refactoring rather than the inline ones, because I'm constantly forgetting to check checkboxes. It's a little harder to see with the inline version. But I understand why they did that.
So I'm inclined to want to put this endpoint on the OpenAI client.
I was going to say that seems like a good place to put it, since if it doesn't already have it, it probably will.
Yeah, it probably does need it. And now this is something that I've gone back and forth on a bunch over the years. Is, do we want to duplicate that constant, or do we want to just refer to that constant? And part of me doesn't like exposing it, and we could do it protected. And part of me doesn't like the idea that if it's wrong in one place, the test will still pass. What's your take on it? What do you prefer?
I think I also struggle with it, and it's one of those it depends. For things like this, I'd probably want OpenAI client to be the one place that has it.
What's special about this as opposed to other things?
So this really does. So this isn't like some fake data or test specific data or something. Like, this is in a sense production information. Yeah, so that's why I would sort of lean towards, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's not a strong feeling.
We just want package protected on this, right?
Yeah.
Is this the right syntax? I don't recall.
That is correct, yes.
All right, so let's do this. Still work?
Yep.
Okay.
Looks good.
All right, you want to do the test here?
All right, so we want to parse the OpenAI response.
So we'll need to create a JSON HTTP client that returns.
Well, we'll say that. So something like this.
Yes, Luigi, I think this is a case. So I think part of the quality strategy for code that integrates with outside systems is what I call paranoid telemetry, which is that I want logging, and I want alerting, and I want monitoring. So I will check it manually to make sure it's correct, and then I will put in logging to tell me if that understanding of correctness ever changes. But I probably wouldn't do an integration test against OpenAI itself, just because those tests don't run as frequently as real production code runs, at least not in a significant system, unlike this one. So I need that production level monitoring in place anyway, and the tests aren't going to catch anything that the production level monitoring doesn't catch first, once I've done the manual test to make sure the endpoint's correct.
So what do we actually want prompt to return? Right now we have it set to return a string. What did we say we wanted?
I think we need to run our manual test again, which means we get the fun and games of not exposing our OpenAI key to the world. We need to see what comes back, and that's what we need to make a DTO for that thing.
Okay. So we expect that this response will be that DTO, at least to start with.
I think so. I mean, isn't that how JSON HTTP client works?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking prompt prompt itself in the AI client may return something different than we get back from the JSON client, because it may do some, like it may toss away some information that's not relevant. What I'm thinking is, what's the API for the AI client versus the API for the HTTP level?
Oh, this response.
Yeah.
This response. I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about this response. Yeah, I think this response, for now, all we care about is a string, right?
Right. So this is sort of the I mean, maybe we call it message for lack of a better term, but yeah, that's what I was asking about this one. Yes, then we do need to figure out this one.
Yeah. I was still stuck here.
Okay.
Oops, sorry,
Oops.
I stepped on your cursor. Go ahead.
And so, are we going to assert? Do we even care? Are we going to assert on? I guess we are going to assert on this.
Yeah, we're going to assert that it's going to be the exact thing we care about.
Yeah.
Let's start it with it as a string. That is a little bit of primitive obsession, and we might want to change that. But I think we almost certainly will want to change it.
Yeah.
But I think starting out with it being a simple string just to get this working is good enough.
Agreed.
Can I go? Can I look at our README real quick?
Yes.
Just coming back to the story we're on right now, or the engineering task we're on right now, is the OpenAI wrapper that talks through OpenAI and the placeholder communication with OpenAI. I think we can finish this whole story with a string response. And then as soon as we're ready to move on to the next thing, we might want to revisit that design decision.
Right.
But just getting the basic wrapper and making sure that it's working manually. Yeah, Suiji, that's exactly how I was thinking about it. So I pulled up my web browser so that you could log in to OpenAI and bring up that documentation that you saw earlier, Ted.
Yep.
Or we could just run a manual. Actually, normally I would just do a manual query.
I think we just do manual query. I just need to get the key.
Yeah.
Where is the key? Hello, key. Let's see. I think we had in our project, we had where was it? Here.
Yeah.
And so we can put, and this key was defined somewhere else.
Right. Hold on. We had it.
I think we had in the private file.
Right. So we'll need to.
We're not showing the screen right now, so we're
okay.
Good.
Perfect.
Open. What was it?
OpenAI.
OpenAI, just all lowercase. Okay.
Maybe it should be called OpenAI key.
Sure. So let's go. Let's close that. And this is OpenAI key. And let's run it. Where did it send? I'm gonna click this.
Oh, it didn't do it. Oh, it's because I didn't click this through again.
Oh.
Okay, try it now.
Okay. Good. Now the underline went away. Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to switch back to showing folks what we got here. So this is the entire
so this is the response.
Yep. That's the response.
So let's go ahead and paste this in to our... There's all this other stuff too. Actually, we want all of this.
I think that was... Yeah, I don't think we need the header stuff.
I don't know if we were going to want any of this header stuff, but
yeah, I guess we could leave it for now. I don't.
yeah, I mean, a proper implementation needs to be able to handle things like rate limiting and
Right,
errors
right.
and so forth.
Yes.
In fact, we should probably put that in our README. We definitely need to, maybe not under placeholder communication, but let's put it as an under a future user story, which is harden communication with OpenAI. And that is OpenAI client error handling. And by the way, I'm sure you noticed this, but I originally was starting to write OpenAI client error handling. But of course, when you're writing a story, it's from the business perspective,
Yes.
right? So you're not going to tell your business partners OpenAI client error handling because they don't know what OpenAI client is.
Right.
But they do understand the idea of, well, we don't want there to be errors when we talk to OpenAI.
Yeah. Yep. So Sweegie asks about paranoid telemetry and sensitive data.
Yeah. So don't write sensitive data to your logs. And one strategy for that is you have an infrastructure wrapper for your logger, right? Right. So what you can do is you can have that, if you're doing structured logging, which is a really good idea.
Yeah.
You can have that infrastructure wrapper look for fields named password or secret, or that have secret in them, in the key name, that is, and to log an alert when it finds it. And then you can strip those things out. And people do make mistakes. I mean, that's sort of the nature of life.
Yep.
So it's not how do we prevent the sensitive data from getting in no matter what. It's how do we figure out when we're accidentally putting it in and stop doing it.
Yep.
So that's my strategy. I don't know if it's the best one, but it's the one I'm using. So now that we know what the response looks like, we want to make a DTO for this, don't we?
Yes.
And this comes back to prompt body.
Why does it come back to prompt body?
Because that's a bad name.
Oh.
And we're going to make a new thing.
Okay.
So I think what we have here is OpenAI client request body and OpenAI client response body.
Yes.
Should I go and rename
that?
that?
Yeah, go ahead and rename that.
I'm not sure. Are we still passing tests?
Oh, it ran the thing, so.
Yeah, can you make it go?
Yeah. So Control Option R brings up this little run dialog, and then we can just say all in backend. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save that configuration to make it more obvious. In fact, I'm going to go edit it to be all things, and then we'll run it. All right. Well, that failed as we expected it.
Right. So I think we'll just disable this test for now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All right.
And then I can come into here and I can call this OpenAI request body.
Mm-hmm.
Work. And then I would actually probably check that in.
Yes.
And I'm not going to worry about the fact that we've got a sort of half-finished test here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to say, because I'm okay with it, the Git history not being perfect. Some people really want it to be perfect, but I'm okay with it being not entirely perfect.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as well.
Okay, so we rename prompt body to open. Okay, so coming back to here, you want to make the response body class?
Yeah, so let's see, what have we actually got in it? So, sorry, I'm going to scroll.
Just the way God intended, Astrid.
So we've got, so let's go ahead here and we'll go ahead and create a new class. Let's see, actually, we can let's try to make this a record. So this will be our OpenAI response.
You trying to go death metal on our name there?
Open.
Hey, Dota. You got an out there.
How did I get real? Oh, really? Oh, that was weird. I wonder if it's one of the keys stuck. OpenAI response, and this is it just response or is it response body?
Response body, I think. I mean, to be consistent, I don't know if that's the right naming convention.
Yeah, I was actually thinking, do we need the word body there? Because the way I tend to think of it is all that's being serialized is the body. But I could go either way.
I kind of like body because for me, the response is the status code, the headers, and the body.
So let's see. So this has a nested object in it, which is going to be record usage. And this is where there are tools to basically create the beans for us. And there's some plugins for IntelliJ that'll do this, but I don't know that they actually use records, the ones I've tempted to use. And this is going to be a choice. And this is going to be message. So message as string for role and string for content.
Choices, it looks like, or does it do magic to convert plurals?
Well, choice is the name of the class, but we're going to call it choices in the parent.
Got it.
So I think.
Yeah, I like choice then, since it's going to be a list of them.
I think. Let's see. So choices is an array of choice objects. So the choice object has a message. Has a string for finish reason. I'm not sure if it'll do the underscores, but we'll hope. And index looks like a number. Will it translate
the underscores for us?
It should, but let's not play around with that just yet.
I kind of like making it exactly what we're getting from OpenAI, just for clarity.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as well. So message, finish index, and finish reason and index. Whoops.
An integer of prompt tokens.
Sorry, I had some bandwidth issues here from you. Let me just.
Are you having bandwidth problems?
I
noticed our last stream had a lot of bandwidth issues as well. I had a playback of the Twitch stream in another tab. I've turned that off.
Okay. So let's see. So we got message, string index, so that looks fine. And then so usage, these are all, looks like ints. So int tokens, int completion tokens, and int total tokens. And then the body itself has, oops, not there. So string ID, string object, that's hilarious. I'm going to just treat that as a long for now for created. It looks like it's clearly a timestamp, but I don't think we care about that right now. String for model, and usage for usage. And then this is choice, which would help if I spelled correctly. choice choices.
Oh, sorry. Did I take your mouse pointer away?
You did.
Oh, sorry. I muted because I had to sneeze. I didn't realize that moving my mouse would cause a problem for you.
So let's see. So we got ID, object created, model, usage of the usage object, choice, an array of those choice objects. I think that's it.
Yeah, that should work. It's 2:00 Pacific time.
Yeah.
So let's leave everybody hanging and
stay tuned to see if this actually works.
Yeah.
All right, we back. We back.
we back.
There was a couple of questions. You did get coffee. Good.
Yeah, I just saw some.
You didn't crash a spaceship. You got coffee. All right.
Yeah.
I crashed the spaceship. So in terms of the record properties, yeah. So I think generally I basically just put everything in because actually usually I'm using a tool to automatically parse everything, and then I'll actually always leave it. I think I tend to just leave it and then let whatever code is actually using it figure out what it needs, and so it's basically always there. And that way, I'm not messing around with anything. I can always regenerate it from, not if they change their API, and I can always regenerate it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I kind of want to capture what's everything that could come back, and then it will be OpenAiClient that will decide what we actually return. We'll actually have some sort of response that's not a string, some sort of object that we return from OpenAiClient, which is going to be the actual thing we return.
Mm-hmm.
Is our stream in good enough shape that we can keep on coding?
I think so. Charlie Pancakes had a question about the content that we're going to expect back. And so that's an interesting question because I don't know that we know the answer to that. So you can tell ChatGPT to return stuff, especially through the API in sort of, we should actually have it return XML, see how that goes.
Or not.
But we could have it in a more structured form. I don't think we need that anytime soon. And if we do, then we'll change it at that point. But I think right now having it as just a string is totally fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think if we do that, I would actually do that as an even higher level wrapper so that we have, or maybe as a higher level wrapper, but we definitely want to get just the core connection working, and then we might have methods on top, additional methods that are like send JSON prompt or something like that.
Right.
Because the other thing is that it's non-deterministic, so we'll have to have it set up so that on those occasions where it decides to give us the wrong JSON back because reasons, we can try again. Say, no, that's not what we meant. Use this JSON response. Yeah. No, actually, you're absolutely right. Like whatever content it returns, parsing that is not the job of the HTTP client. Yeah. Or the OpenAI client. Or even necessarily the OpenAI client. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I think there is a case to be made. Well, maybe we just have multiple methods we call an OpenAI client. Or you could say, actually, no, there's a AI Chronicles OpenAI layer. Yeah. Because the OpenAI client we're building here is actually technically somewhat reusable. It doesn't have to be just for AI Chronicles. Yeah. But that's and that's one of those things where it's like, when we need it, we'll figure it out. We don't need to, right now that's a Yagni. Yeah. So what we do need right now is we need to say new OpenAI response body. And I mean, this sort of gets back to what I think it was Jay was saying. Was it Jay or somebody was saying, do we really need all these things? It does make it a little bit awkward in terms of doing our test here because we don't care about the vast majority of these things. The only thing we really care about is the choice, right? Why are we getting multiple choices back? I don't know. Do we care about choice or do we care about? Yeah, because that's where the message is. Oh, that's where the message is, right? Yeah. I
have
So
no
if we're
idea
getting
why
multiple
it's an
choices
array.
back, like that's kind of a big deal. Can we look at the documentation?
We can look at the documentation.
Do you want to do that on my machine?
Yeah,
or,
let's do that on
because
your
I'm not gonna be able
machine.
to see it.
So, chat versus completions. I guess we want API reference.
Yeah.
And we want making completions. Yeah. So that's the request body. So that's the request body. Where is the so this is the response. Where does it describe the response? Am I missing it?
I think it's actually chat. This is the one that we're, hold on one second. Let me double check our actual endpoint that we're using.
I think we're using completions.
v1/chat/completion.
Oh, it's chat completions. Okay. So messages is a list of messages describing the conversation so far.
This is the request
body. Is it going to return the entire conversation so far? So I guess if we do have a full conversation versus just a one shot, then we will get, I guess, every time we'll get the array of messages. So
yeah.
So that means there must be some identifier for the conversation for continuity.
Or maybe we just send the whole conversation every time. But this is interesting. It only is giving us the request body, not the response body. Let's see.
Yeah, documentation is a little confusing. But I think we're in the right place because we have the request body here, and then this is the response body for the chat.
Yeah, they're just not documenting the response. Like they're telling us what the response is, but they're not.
No, I'm sorry, they were.
Were they?
It just wasn't clearly. Yeah, so go back to chat and then create chat completion.
Mm-hmm. That's where we are.
Yeah, and so if we scroll down.
Yeah, I don't see anything about a response body.
We just saw it right here. Oh, this is the body. I read that as
the request body.
I read that as the response. You're right. They don't define the response. Oh, so I misread this. So these are the messages that we send, and we can send multiple messages out, and with different roles for each thing. So there's ways to say, here's the user message, and here's the sort of the system behind the scenes message.
Yeah, this is so we can send.
Yeah,
it's stateless.
Right.
So if we want to have a conversation, we have to send the whole thing.
So presumably, it would be nice if they actually defined the response, right? That's what we're
There
not
might
saying.
be sort of one standard response that they send. I'm just flipping through looking for. There's obviously, I mean, typically at this point, and we're not going to do it because we're on stream, but typically what I would do is I would just go away for half an hour, thoroughly read the documentation, and then come back, right?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So they define the response format partially in the guides, but not in the API reference. That's pretty sucky.
Yeah. It's giving us a lot of access into the internals, though. So the completions. is very detailed on a completion for a particular prompt, but whereas chat is a whole conversation. And I think chat is what we want.
I think so, yeah.
So
yeah, we can ask OpenAI. It's like, hey, OpenAI, where have you documented your response body?
that actually is not a terrible idea. Do you have access?
I do.
Like, could we pose it a question?
Yeah, you can go to we can go to chat.openai. Log in. This one doesn't matter as much. Let's see if I still have that. Yes. So you can go ahead and type your question.
What is the name of this thing? It's the OpenAI
API reference.
Okay. In the OpenAI API for the specifically the endpoint, what is the purpose? The choices.
I would say array field.
Oh, okay, so it's literally a choice of responses.
So when would we get multiple versus one?
Well, it certainly sounds confident.
So it looks like if you wanted multiple choices, you would ask for it by specifying this parameter, which defaults to 1, which is why we get 1. Yeah.
And that's actually what Suiji is saying in the chat as well.
Yeah.
I think last time, Suiji, you talked about being a chatbot yourself. So congratulations, you've beat out ChatGPT.
I certainly hope they've trained it on up-to-date API of their own, but that's of course not
we talked about
guaranteed.
this, I think, a few episodes ago about how great it would be to have an interface like this describing the APIs. But no guarantees.
No guarantees, right. But it seems we have Suiji's to back us up on that, so it's probably right.
It's probably right.
Okay, well that explains why there are multiple, because then we can specify there's the n defaults to 1.
Yeah. Okay, so it literally is choices.
Right.
Okay, so if we come back to here, we're going to create a response body that has an ID, irrelevant ID, a created time, which I don't care about.
The second parameter is the irrelevant object.
Oh, thank you.
Which is just some irrelevant string.
And then a usage, which is going to be 42.
Okay.
42.
Yep. Take away that
and
comma.
Then a list of and the message is going to be the actual message.
Right.
OpenAI response.
Yes, Astrid, that's true. Even API documentation isn't always correct anyway.
That's so true.
So we want to get rid of this comma here.
Oh yeah, that's a JavaScriptism. I love being able to have.
I know. I don't know if that's planned to be added, but that would be such a nice addition.
It is. It's one of those things where when I first saw it, I was like, well, no, I'm going to use the right number of commas in all cases. And then once I finally let myself do it, just being able to move them around so easily.
Let's just say roll here.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Call that irrelevant role.
They're asking me to spell. I always have trouble spelling irrelevant. I think I got it right. It's not a list of, it's actually an array. We could make it a list.
No, let's make it an array.
There's no reason to. So we could say new choice. Where's that going to go? That's going to go here. That looks also right.
That should be. Be consistent.
Yep. Oh, that's interesting, Charlie Pancakes. Yeah, we could sort of pre-generate a bunch of options up front to get a more immediate response. That's a good idea.
Yeah, or especially when we're doing JSON, we could say, give us 5 responses, and then we'll loop through them until we get one that actually parses. Rather than having to make multiple round trips to the. Yeah.
Hey, Kuros. Yeah, there's arrays of. I was going to do it the old-fashioned way. I hate arrays.
I think I like arrays of better just because it's more consistent with the way we did the rest of it. We are in a current JavaScript version, right? Or
yes.
a Java version. Apparently not enough current.
We're pretty current. It's copies of. Is it copy of?
No, those want an array as a parameter. Looks like it's not in there, so let's just keep with what was working. Okay, let's run this. It should fail because we're returning null or something like that.
Let's see. So we're we're returning. Right, we're returning null. Yes, right.
Yeah. No worries, Kuros. It sounded promising.
It sounded. It's something I would have expected from ChatGPT. Totally sounds reasonable, but completely untrue.
So yes, on brand. So yeah, we should get expected my OpenAI response got null.
Excellent.
Okay, except we need to be consistent about how we spell OpenAI.
Yeah, I noticed we're not always consistent.
Okay, so here we should be getting. Well, let's.
You can have IntelliJ break it down.
Can we?
Say command option enter, and then. Well, now it's all, now it doesn't know what to do. And then you can, yep.
There we go.
But it still puts the first one next to the paren, which I think we don't like.
Yeah.
There's a way to configure that, I'm sure, but I'll have to look at that.
Yeah, I looked for it and I didn't see it.
Maybe not. I'll file an issue. I've been on an issue filing craze with IntelliJ. There's some annoying little things that I just kept saying, oh, I should file an issue on that, and finally I did.
Good.
We'll see if they fix it though, but
yeah. So this should be, instead of void.class, this should be OpenAIResponseBody.class.
Right.
And this should be I'm going to use your trick.
So when you want to extract variable or assign it to a variable, you don't even have to select the whole thing. You just say, I want to extract variable, and then it'll offer you different options for what scope do you want to actually have as a variable.
So response dot choices 0 dot. Making you cringe.
Yes.
It's making me cringe too.
Message dot content. Yeah.
That's a great error message. Thanks.
Oh. It's saying that the post is returning a string? So this should be the converted response type.
Do we pass that through properly? I mean, we're using the nulled version here, so... Oh, are we using the nulled version?
Yes, because we've configured the null.
So we're not actually doing an integration test.
Oh, so we're not... You're right, so we're not using this.
Well, we are using that. We're just using... we're using the stubbed REST template wrapper.
Right, so is that doing the right thing?
Where's the actual error coming from? Error's happening here.
So it's saying somewhere underneath the class.
Can we do this? Can we say bar that and then to see what we're getting back?
Of course we can. So we'll have to look at the whole output here. So it is an OpenAI response body.
Wait, it sends prompt to OpenAI that's failing. I know what the problem is.
Oh, okay. Were we looking at the wrong test failure?
Boink. That's the problem right there.
Ah.
So what we need is an irrelevant response.
Yep.
Which is going to look a lot like this.
Yep. I think you want that inside the class. Yep.
Good. Again.
Yeah, Luigi says a better error message, but I think it's a validation on the nulled response that was that should have that would have been useful for it to tell us, because it wasn't the HTTP client, it was the configured response that was wrong.
I don't know if we could. Yeah, I don't think that error message was within our control.
Yeah, it would have been more. What do we expect? So on yeah, I'm actually not sure that with as much we could have done.
Yeah, unless we said that the JSON HTTP client had to return the same type of object
Yeah,
every
right.
time.
Right. Which
I don't think we can do.
we decided we couldn't do. Yeah. We could. Yeah, I'm not sure what else we could do.
Yeah, actually, we could check the types before returning the stubbed response because the configured response didn't match the response type.
Oh, right, the configured response. Right, we could have checked against that. Yes.
Yeah. In fact, maybe we should do that.
Yeah.
But let's get this working first.
Yes.
Okay. So
right.
This actually may have been working.
Right. Yes.
And it was. Okay, I'm going to check this in.
Yes.
Oops, actually, no, we don't want to check in that private file. What did we do here?
We parse the response.
Yeah, OpenAI client parses. Let's fix that error message.
Yes. Okay, right. So that's failing in the sends prompt.
That's actually going to be inside of JSON HTTP client that we want to fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah. May I?
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be down here in our exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Our response, T response is next response. So this is where the class cast exception is happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what we need to do is pull this out into a variable.
Right.
Type object response. And then we'll need to validate it here. I don't know how to do that. Do you?
So we would say, well, what do we want to happen?
We want to check it versus the type, which is response type. So check the responses of the type response type. And if it's not, we want to fail nicely. And we should be writing a test around this.
Yeah. I was just trying to figure out. So we want something like that. Something like that. Okay.
So go ahead and put it in because we've got a failing test right now. We'll use that to fine tune it, and then we can write the proper test.
So we want to. And what do we want to do? Throw an exception?
Yeah, I think so. Just a better message. What would be a good exception here? Class cast exception, actually.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Configured response. Type of configured response type does not match expected type. No, that's not quite right. Yeah.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, that should be.
Yep. That should be response dot class.
Yeah.
Does not match expected.
Then a little bit more.
All right.
If we'd seen that error, we would have been on it right away. Can I fiddle with this a little bit more?
Yep.
I want to say something along the lines of URL figured to return a response of type. But the request assumed a type.
Missing a plus there.
This message didn't actually
scream the right thing. Yep.
Request ask for a
But this is the response, so is it the request asked for or the request returned?
No, the response type is what we asked for.
No, the response type is what we're casting the response into.
Right. When we make the request, we say cast the response.
Right. So I'm saying that this is confusing to me when it says the request asked for. Yeah. That's what I meant.
And then
yeah.
And classed onto it. Was configured to return an instance of class string, but the request said the response should be cast to class. Yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm also wondering about some new lines.
I'd be okay with that.
So what I might do is put a new line but around the class, because it can tend to be long. So something like that.
I was actually thinking that it might be nice to have brackets around it, and I think new lines would be just as good.
Let's see. Yeah, something to make it stand out more.
I don't think we need another new line there.
Yeah, no, we
it'll
don't.
just be a period.
Yeah.
But we could take the period out.
Yeah, because the period actually was a little confusing. And I guess we don't need a comma. And
yeah, I think that works really well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do we want to write proper tests for this?
I think we do.
Yeah.
Let me go ahead and fix this. This is going to be our irrelevant response body. Now our test should be passing. And if we go back to our tests, So we've got null get for unconfigured, blah, blah, blah.
I don't think we have it.
I'm just thinking, where is the right place to put this?
Yeah.
I think maybe here.
Yeah, around where there are other exceptions being thrown.
What just happened there?
I don't know, but that was funny. The K would be silent in that case, so it would still be null.
Yeah. So null get throws exception. I would actually call this fails fast. Fails fast when configured response and match.
So are we doing the get first? Because or we're going to do the post since that's what we just
I think we'll
wrote.
do both.
Okay.
I thought I'd do the get first, partly because we haven't done that one.
Yep.
And because that's just what comes first in our stuff here.
Just making sure.
When configured response doesn't match expected response type.
Yep.
So that's going to look a lot like this. We're going to have an endpoint that's configured to return a example ask for the endpoint for the example response class. Don't care about this.
Right.
Do the get to the endpoint. We don't even need this at all. Do we want this tooltip?
So that's the stream tooltip. So yeah, I tend to leave that on.
You do leave that on?
Yeah.
Okay. So we want it to be instance of class cast exception. And the message is URL endpoint configured to return instance of what is it? Java.lang.string?
Yes. Oh, I think the toString on that prepends the word class.
You're right. But the request said the response should be cast to and we'll figure out what that's going to be when we actually do it.
And there's some spaces before I don't know why we have a space before a new line.
That's why I left that out.
Okay.
I did that deliberately.
I realized like your test doesn't match was like, oh wait, we don't want that.
Yeah, no, we don't. So that should have failed. Why didn't that fail at all? If we post to that, we can't post to it. Null's not going to work, is it?
Actually, I think null might have been okay.
Oh yeah, null was okay. Okay, so our post is working, but our get is not failing for whatever reason.
That's weird because it does a cast when it does the next response.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and keep this as our post. And we'll disable it for now. Oh, now it's failing. That's weird.
Wait, what? No, you're still
Oh
doing
no,
post.
it's failing because it's still
Yeah.
doing post.
No, the get is not using exchange. The get for entity is doing this.
Yeah. Get is using get for entity. Well, let me try something. They're giving me an error on that.
It's just saying that's just a warning
Okay.
because you're doing an unchecked cache cast. So is next response doing the right thing? Because it's saying it's an iterator of T. Is it just taking on whatever the type of the map that we passed in?
I don't know. Let me try tracing through from, so JSON and HTTP client goes to get. That doesn't emit. Then we do get for entity, which comes to here.
Oh, I think. Sorry, can we scroll up a bit here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Does this T match the response type? This is where generics make my head hurt.
Yeah. I mean, get and post should be more or less identical because we based one off the other. But yeah, let's actually hold on. Go back up real quick. I just want to look at how get and post are different. So get for entity, URL template, converted response type, variables, and exchange.
Yeah, it's
Looks identical to me.
looks pretty much the same.
Okay, go ahead. You can keep on.
So I was gonna look here and where was the
There's your exchange. Yeah, we're expecting a class cast exception, Sweegie, and we're not getting any exceptions. What happens if we don't make an assertion? That's going to pass?
it should, because we're not even calling the get.
Oh, well, yeah. It's really weird. Now it's failing.
Is it because we were... I was going to say because we're throwing away the response, but we were doing that for the post as well. That's really weird.
Yeah, it might be. Astrid's right. I think we've got some dead code optimization.
Well, I'm surprised then assigning it to a variable didn't throw it away.
Yeah.
Because the variable is unused. But we're still getting the class cast. So if we do
Okay,
this,
that's freaking bizarre.
So if we do this, let's put it in.
Put in
yeah.
braces. Yeah.
Oops. One more. There we go. Oh. If I'm going to put braces in, I got to put the semicolon in. So now it's throwing it.
Yeah. Okay.
Interesting.
Astrid says post has a side effect. Yeah, post does have a side effect. So yeah, I think what we saw was dead code elimination.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that was a tricky one.
Wow.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm going to just cut and paste for the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we want to do is modify next response to take the expected response type and put the fail fast code in there.
Right. Yes, I agree.
Okay, and it would help if we did all of this stuff.
Yep.
And doing it, I'll do it here too.
So now we expect that one to pass.
No, because we don't actually have the right.
Oh, because we don't have the right full path, right?
But now, unless we've gotten something wrong, I think that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if we turn this one off, it should fail because of the class name.
Right.
Now it should pass because I fixed it.
Yep.
Okay. You want to factor out this stuff?
Yeah. So do we want to take the whole if block?
I think we want next response to be templated and have us do the casting inside of next response.
Okay. So we want we basically kind of want to go back to T.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we can get rid of this.
Then we'll pass the expected or the response type through to next response.
Okay. So Yes. Thank you.
Oh, what was that message? I didn't see
It
it.
was just saying, and you can press it again to bring up the options for the thing. It's like, yes, I know. And so now let's
Why does it want the interpolated URL?
that's a good question. Oh, because that's this thing. That's what is basically this parameter.
Oh, okay.
Let me just move this down. And so let's...
So on line 164, that should be URL interpolated URL, and we can get rid of that extra URL parameter.
So you're saying that's the same as this?
Yeah, we shouldn't have two URLs.
Okay. What's it saying? Oh, it's static. It's another reason I don't like the... Another reason I don't like the inline extract method is it hides some of the options because we didn't necessarily want that to be. So let's see. If that works, then I can inline this and then get rid of the next response and then rename it back. So,
you need to modify post or
yeah,
exchange.
I know. I just want to see if it would find the duplicate. Nope, didn't. Oh well.
It's not quite similar enough, I don't think.
Let's see. If we change this to T and we get rid of this, does it now think it's the same? Nope, still not quite right. Okay, so we want this to be with a cast check. Oh, because it takes this as parameter, right? So this is the response type. And it needs to be the other way around, which we will switch up later because we do want that order. And then we can get rid of this, supposedly. Let's see. Yep.
Hey, thanks, Astrid.
All right, Astrid, have a good night. Swap that. So it's in the right order. Rename it.
Have you inlined it yet?
And now we can inline this.
Oh, I guess it's overloaded, so it worked anyway.
Yeah. So inline and remove. And it's going to muck up the response. So this should be responses.
Mm-hmm.
And
make a blank line there.
Yeah, where I was looking for that break.
Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, let me take a look at this. Oops.
No, you don't want to. I don't think you want to inline that. Yes.
What do you think of that?
Let's see. I'm actually fine with it. Or prefer it to be separate. It's a little much to.
Yeah, it is a little much. At first, I thought, oh well, now it's just it's a sort of silly little one-liner, but no, I think it works this way.
Yeah.
But I think putting them right next to each other works.
Yeah.
In fact, we don't really need blank lines on those.
Yeah.
And then here, that's good. I love, that's what I expect from a mature, heavily reused library or class. Is there's going to be all this fail fast code in it and really help us discover errors. So I think this is quality.
Yeah. So my tendency, and I'm not sure what you think about it, is my tendency is to pull out these as named guard clauses because it's pretty bulky, especially some of this checking here. I tend to call them requires or ensure.
I use ensure a lot, and probably don't pull it out as often as you do, but I'm fine with doing that. Do you want to do that here?
Yeah. So what I tend to do is
pull it out only if it's used more than once. Otherwise, I'll just leave it in line, because this is now it's a kind of a long method. It's like, what is that?
That is 17 lines.
17 lines. I'm not seeing that, but
it says down here in the status, it says 17 line breaks.
17 line breaks. Yeah, it's 17 lines, which is kind of long, but it's really only like 6 or 7 statements, which is still in my realm of acceptable.
So I tend to go where not about line numbers, but understandability. How long does it take me to figure out what is meant by this if statement? What does that mean? And to me, it's a little bit like, okay, especially with the inverted, that tends to take like twice as long to understand.
Yeah. What I key on is the throw new. Like, I see that and I'm like, oh yeah, guard clause, bam.
Yeah. So I tend to pull these out and call it, require configure it. And I'm just going to throw something in here. Require a configuration for.
We say ensure because that definitely triggers in my brain that this is a guard clause.
So the reason why I use the two terms differently comes from the way Bertrand Meyer talks about pre and post conditions. He uses require for preconditions, incoming stuff, and ensure is we want to make sure that the state outgoing is a certain thing. So I tend to use require a lot, but I'm happy to use ensure if that makes you more comfortable.
No, let's go with require then.
So what do I say? Require configuration for. And then,
that's actually not a good name for this. This should be require configured response.
Okay. And this is, oops. Why is it? Oh, it's trying to figure out the destination class.
Stub dress template.
That's interesting. Did it show me that before and I didn't see it?
I didn't see it.
So this is require responses, require configured responses. This one's a little bit tricky because it takes responses as a parameter. And to me, this is a note that, maybe you want an object that has these responses as a completely separate container.
But now it's overkill because we're taking 9 lines of code and turning it into multiple classes.
No, I'm just saying that it's a signal. It doesn't necessarily mean I will act upon it.
Yeah.
And then this one is something like that.
Okay.
Oh, it extracted those as statics. That's why. That's interesting. And that's why I was asking. Okay.
All right. Is this all still working?
Let's see. Yep.
I don't understand why it's working because this, I guess it's just doing some sort of late.
I would assume it's kind of lazy, yeah, until you actually pull something out.
Which is why our test wasn't failing before.
Yeah, because at runtime, that T doesn't exist.
Yeah, generics aren't part of the runtime engine.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And so until you actually try to cast it there on line 160 and then actually use that response so that the cast actually happens, then basically nothing happens. Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to check this in. Oops, I've got to not check in our environment.
You can delete it because I'm going to, unless you think we're going to use it again today.
I don't think we are, no.
Because I'm going to rotate that key anyway.
What have we done? We've add type checking or fail fast.
Fail fast with
JSON HTTP client is used, figured, with wrong response type.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Should we take a break?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. We'll be back. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we've finished modifying JSON HTTP client, and we've got our test here passing. So our OpenAI client is working.
Yes.
So I think if we go back to our README, that's not our README. Go back to our README. We want to make an OpenAI wrapper that talks to the real OpenAI. I think that's done. And we've wanted to do this. That's definitely done.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's time to do manual test of communication. I'm not going to mark the OpenAI wrapper done until we know that it actually works.
Right.
But, so we need to write a little temporary test that calls OpenAI client.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to make it. Oh, well, you know what we don't have yet? We don't have a create.
Right. Okay. And create needs to return.
It needs a
return type. Yep.
So we'll call OpenAI client.create with the API key. We'll call prompt on it. And then we should get a response back.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Do you want to code that up?
Sure.
Is there a way for us to do this without exposing your API key? Without exposing it, without going to a huge amount of work to
without a huge amount of work, no.
And everything else.
I was like, I was trying to think of how much work there is. It's like that's enough that
we'll just rotate the key.
Well, we can hide the code right before I put the key in. We'll run it and then we'll delete it just so we can see it. Yeah, we could put in an environment variable. I don't know that that's much easier than just hiding at the right time. So let's write what we need.
Right. Before we do that,
yeah.
Let's just look at, so all of this, I think we can get rid of now, right?
I think we can get rid of this for now, yeah.
Down to there. And this was all the planning, and boom. Yeah, all that's, why is it not?
I'm not sure what key you're pressing, so I'm not sure what you're doing.
Pressing shift down to select multiple lines. It's not, it keeps undoing it on me.
I swear my hands were off the mouse.
Yeah. I know what you're doing. Over in your Discord, you're like, let's screw with Jim. See how long it takes him to notice.
All right, so should we write test in here and then just disable it?
Yeah, I think just write something like this is what I was thinking. Like I tend to be really obvious about what a terrible idea this is. And I wouldn't disable it. I'd just delete it entirely.
Oh, interesting. Because I tend to keep it around just so that when I do need to run it manually, it's there. But I'm totally fine with deleting it as well.
Yeah, I'm on to you, Suiji.
So we want to say
The reason I like to delete it is because when I see skipped tests, it's like a constant, oh, did I accidentally forget to unskip to re-enable that?
Yeah, so what I tend to do is put in a separate test class and tag it manual. And so that way it's never run and it doesn't show up as disabled. It just is never run during normal circumstances.
I think that's fine too.
Because you can configure Maven to say, ignore this test group, these tests tagged with this. But this one I think is so short that it's not a big deal. So we want to say OpenAI client, create our API key, which we'll fill in a second. That's our client. We're going to call on the client. We're going to call prompt. We're going to have some prompt. We'll figure that out in a second. And this is our...
And then I think we just want to
response. And I like to just say assert that response is empty to force it to fail. So it shows it up.
If we're going to keep this test, let's do a couple of things here. Let's factor this out here as API key. And let's do this too as equal to
all right. So what do we want our prompt to say? What do we have as our...
Yeah, we can just reuse our prompt that we did when we did our previous manual test.
I don't remember what that was.
I got it. It is in here.
Ah, there it is. I knew it was somewhere.
And, yeah. And factor this out too. Oh, wait. Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Then I will, even though these aren't technically constants, I'll often do them like this because they are kind of acting like constants in the context of this little test. I know you don't like shouty variables. I think that was you who said you didn't like shouty variables.
It's just not idiomatic. I don't hate it. But since this is going to go in its own class, I would probably promote it just to a constant.
Right. Okay, so let's
run it and at least expect that we'll get some kind of error about not being authorized.
Yeah, before you run that reminds me, over here, when we're talking about hardening the communication, what we need to do is, what if response doesn't have all the fields we think it does?
Right.
And also, what if OpenAI doesn't like the API key or throws some other?
Yeah. So definitely like rate limiting, because I actually have a hard limit of like $5. If it spends more than $5, it just stops.
Yeah. Just this is something I'll often do is as I'm doing the happy path, I will come up with these failure modes. We don't want to solve them right now.
Exactly. But we don't want to forget about them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I won't be able to like brainstorm as in much detail in the future as we are doing right now.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah. All right. So let's.
I wonder if we're going to need a class cast exception.
I actually expect a class cast exception of some sort. That one of those records is not going to. Oh, that's interesting. So that makes sense because it didn't even return anything. So it immediately threw an exception.
Yeah. So when we start hardening this, I think we're going to be fighting with Spring because it expects what happens? Like if it gets something that's not what we expect and it tries to put it in the record, does it just throw an exception at us?
If it wasn't okay, So if it was an okay response, then it would try to deserialize it into the records, and that's when it would fail
in some way.
Yeah. That would be some. It's been a while since I've deserialized stuff wrong, but whatever that is, that would happen. Okay, so that's good that happened as we expected.
Right. So we're going to go into secret mode.
Yeah, I'm going to go into turn off the code mode. Let me go grab the key again.
Can people still hear us when we're in secret mode?
Yes, because I'm switching to just the video cameras, not the screen view.
Okay.
All right. So now they don't see the screen, but they see and hear us. And I'll paste this in. That looks about right. And I'll run it.
Okay, and then you can undo, right?
Yeah, and then I'll undo, and then I'll reveal
the glorious result. It did not like our request. And this is the problem of doing it this way. And maybe we should have started out with a manual test, but we were starting out with a manual test, so I'm not sure why it didn't work, because we encoded the manual test that we had into our code.
So it's saying messages is a required property. Is that not what we have?
I mean, where'd my cursor go? Oh, it's over here.
So this would be our request body.
Right. Where's our request body?
It is a list of message.
Is there a way for us to see?
Oh, it's message, not messages.
Oh.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's our bad.
Yeah. So let's.
And our tests are still going to pass because we don't. Yeah, I still like the way I do it in JavaScript better, where you actually just paste in this is the literal string that should come out, because we don't have any test of the actual structure of the JSON. It's just here's
right,
the thing.
Right.
And I don't know that there is a good way to test it.
There is. We could manually do the same thing that Spring does, because we'd be calling the same library, which is call Jackson to say please serialize this into JSON for us, and then we'd be able to compare against that.
Well, our test should still run, other than the delete me test, right?
I assume so. Let's see. So let me disable the delete me test for a second. So I'll just do that. Yeah, so that's fine.
Okay.
All right, so let's go back to hiding the screen.
Super double secret mode.
Yeah. And run it.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So let me undo that and then switch us back to code. So we now see that this was the response sent or retrieved from OpenAI.
Yeah, perfect. So that's good. I think, so we now have OpenAI client working. What's really bugging me, though, is that we can come along and make a well-meaning change to OpenAI request body,
and we would not know about it.
Completely break it, and our test will all still pass.
Right.
That's like, I know my ability to screw things up is high enough to do that. I have a lot of faith in my ability to get things wrong. So But at the same time, I don't want to rebuild Spring. Like, I don't want to manually do all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically it's how much risk are we willing to put up with versus effort. So risk reward kind of thing. If we weren't streaming, I would probably go write some tests, because there'd be really boring tests to make sure that that gets serialized correctly.
Yeah.
Because I basically just say, basically what Suiji says is it's not parsing the JSON that's the problem, because that we'd find out. Maybe. I mean,
no, it's both of them.
Yeah, it would be both ways. So we'd write basically JSON parsing, JSON serialization tests.
I mean, really, what I think it means is we should be in our test when we're saying that the expected request right here, rather than, we should be not returning the object, we should be returning the string, the body, the actual body. But before we do that, or I don't know if we're going to do that, let's check in and say we have successfully or manually verified AI client. So we've got half an hour. Is this the right thing to do? Do we want to go into here and have this be JSON instead of?
I don't. Not on stream. Maybe do it off stream, but I think that's just tedious and not terribly interesting.
It is tedious. I think it is the right thing to do, but maybe not on stream.
Yeah.
Okay. But let me put that in our README as an engineering task, if nothing else. So we've made an OpenAI wrapper that talks to the real thing.
Are there two Unicode characters that are making up that box and arrow? Is that why that's happening?
Yeah. So I don't know how familiar you are with Unicode, but a lot of Unicode is a lot of emojis are normal Unicode character plus an emoji character. Yeah. So I guess the arrows are like normal arrow plus the make it an emoji arrow.
Make it a boxed light background. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. Yeah. And it doesn't look like that's how it works for the checkboxes. And of course, And of course, the way IntelliJ works is it actually allows you to delete one character at a time.
Right.
Flags are one of my favorites because they're made up of actual country codes. It's just
country code plus flag,
and it does basically a ligature type of thing, and it makes a flag out of it. Yeah. Which means that if you, it's one of my favorite pieces of trivia. If you reverse Spain, you get Sweden, because ES goes to SE.
Right.
So if you do string.reverse on a Spanish flag, you get the Swedish flag.
That's hilarious.
Which is exactly what you'd expect going to a Swedish beach.
Yes. So we want to let's not forget the thing we came here to do, which is the engineering task to test the JSON.
Oh, right. Sorry. I had completely forgot about that.
Like, why are we here? Why are we in this file?
So we need to change HTTP tests to test against JSON rather than. Now we have a note here to do a nullable OpenAI wrapper, but I actually don't think we need to do that yet. I think we've finished our first user story, which is we have a placeholder communication.
I agree.
With OpenAI, which means that our next user story, if these are still in the right order, and of course proper Agile team would be evaluating this at every moment, would be to make that placeholder web page.
Mm-hmm.
So do we want to start that in the half hour we have remaining?
I think let's do that. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so let me find, am I not getting my emojis now? I'll just cut and paste. So we need to make new engineering tasks for this. Get rid of these, they're done. Back to you, and I'm going to leave this one in here because we do need to do that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we need to do here?
So what do we mean by placeholder web page? What is the behavior? What if any behavior do we expect from it?
Right. So if we are an extreme programming team, we'd ask our customer. Thanks, Charlie. We need one of those little digging animations from the 90s.
Absolutely.
It's like a 16 pixel.
Yeah. And the construction with the yellow and black lines on saddle horses. Yeah, absolutely. All those apply.
So I think if we were to ask our customer, they'd be like, well, what I really care about is talking to robots. But if you really have to do it, I've talked to a lot of customers. But if you really have to do it, then show me a web page with the user interface on it. But I think that's just a matter.
I would actually, as with my customer hat on, I would say, well, how about I talk to the OpenAI and provide the prompt from the UI?
Well, we have that as this story, though.
But that's the conversation. I'm saying, I just want to type in, I want to talk to OpenAI. And I'm not saying this is correct. I'm just saying that one thing I could see is I want to see the front end talk through the back end to OpenAPI.
I mean, that was my understanding of what this was, is go all the way from the front end to the back end. And that this was just literally nothing but the web page.
In that case, then it's just the Chrome of the...
Yeah, just hard code the UI mockup, I think is what we're doing here.
Right.
But I think putting our engineering hat on, let's convert UI into React components.
Right. So I failed in supplying us with our mock-up, so we'll have to just do it on the fly.
I was wondering about that. I wasn't going to ask.
I totally forgot. It was not on the list my to-do list that I've been going against.
Yeah.
I will go.
Well, you've also been pretty busy, so. Speaking of which, put the JSON DTO thing on your list for us right after the stream. So
literally writing JSON as you say that.
Good.
And I will transfer this to my active to-do list. Okay.
So as I recall, you had a lovely little SketchUp diagram.
I did. I had a paper diagram. Let's see. Switch to cameras. So it's basically this.
Yeah, there we go. So I don't know how much CSS we want to do on stream. I am able to make CSS work. Oh, I don't know if you know this, Ted, and I bet you most of the people watching this don't know this. Several years ago, I wrote a CSS testing framework.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, called Quixote. And unfortunately, I've not kept it up to date. So even though it's on brand, I don't think we'll use it because I don't think it's ready to be used. But that would be very cool if we were doing something like that. So I think, should we just go over to the front end and start? Can we make the first? Strange.
Yeah.
Worse sins have been committed, Stu.
Yes. I think we can start with just the active part of, or the main part, the conversational part of the UI, which is basically showing just the conversation
That should be pretty easy.
Like so if I think about, so I always think about outside in, but also, sort of start to end. What's the first thing we see is sort of the initial story.
Right.
And so basically a mock-up that showed, here's the setting, the context, and then what would what do you do?
Right. Let's, because this is just a placeholder, let's not put the story in yet. Because I think we might want to have that also be generated by OpenAI.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of I was basically saying insert story here. Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, because we are doing placeholder, so that's placeholder text and a placeholder front end.
Well, let me walk you and everybody through what's going on in the front end right now.
Yeah.
This index.html is our front end, and it says hello from HTML, and it has the ability to load React. And we can do a serve dev from the front end, which I don't know if it actually does a build. I don't think it does a build, so I'm going to do a build as well, just in case. Because we have to bundle up all of our JavaScript. And then once that's running, we can go to localhost 5010, and there you go. And then when you click, you get a little message.
Mm-hmm.
So that all gets inserted into this React root. And when it does index.tsx. This is what actually substitutes into the bundle. And here is all of the code that's making that happen.
Right.
And then hello is just a component that I wrote to validate that React was working.
Right.
So if we were to do this properly, probably wouldn't do it in index.tsx. Index.tsx is just basically the bootstrapping.
Right.
I would make a new component, which was like an application component.
Right.
And have that do everything.
Right.
We do have the ability to test this code.
Of course.
But generally speaking, I'm not going to be testing the rendering stuff without using Quixote, the CSS testing framework. So I think we could start making the application.tsx our sort of root component and just start putting stuff in there.
Yeah.
And manually verifying it.
Sounds good.
Do you want to do that, or shall I get going on it?
This is a bit more your area, so why don't you kick it off?
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to leave the hello in here, but let's make a note in the README to remove hello component. And I don't think we need our tests running at this point. What we can do, though, is have it automatically continue to bundle so that as we make changes, we can manually validate it. So in here, we should be able to just say root render application. And I'm not sure if that works in TSX or not. I guess we'll find out. And then can I introduce?
I have no idea what those are going to do.
Create function component application.
Oh.
There we go. Oh, I didn't put it where I was hoping to put it. Okay, so the newest version of React is kind of cool in that it's highly functional. So what we can say here is we can just say return p. This is the placeholder. And
So it's looking for application.js, not TSX.
Well, that's actually correct.
Because that's the compiled,
TSX
right?
is cross-compiled down
Got
to
it.
JS.
Right.
I'm just not sure why it's not resolving that, but that may be because the watch script doesn't recognize new files very cleanly.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
All right.
There is to it. So how much do you know about how React works?
It's been a while since I've looked at it, so probably any knowledge I have is probably out of date.
Yeah. So React, I did an investigation of 3 popular front-end frameworks way back in the day, like 6 years ago. And they were AngularJS, the original one, Ember, and React. And of them, React was absolutely my favorite because the other ones were trying to be frameworks. They were trying to own the world.
Yeah.
Whereas React was really just being a library. And it's got this funky JSX thing, which you look at and you're like, well, what is this? Are you writing HTML inside your code?
Yeah.
The answer is no, we're not. If we look at what's actually being compiled here, where is application? There it is. That was just IntelliJ being weird. What it's doing is it's calling a function called JSX with the name of the tag and what's inside of it. So it's converting what looks like HTML into actual JavaScript code.
Right.
Which is a really nice way because of doing it. Because if you look at somebody who's building a rendering library from scratch, they will end up making a little P library, a little P function, a little this, a little that. But it gets kind of tedious. And so wrapping that up in something that looks like HTML is nice.
Right.
Now, the downside, of course, is it's a leaky abstraction.
Yeah. Because
it's not 100%, it's not actually HTML.
Right.
So you do have to be aware that it's returning something that's not really HTML. And then from there, you can put parameters and properties, and it gets complicated, but all those just get passed in as parameters to the function. But for our purposes right now, all we have to do is make the thing. So I think what we can do is there's this special syntax, which is this.
That's weird.
That says return multiple things.
Okay.
Multiple. It's basically a collection of elements because we can only return one element.
Okay.
And earlier versions of React, you'd have to return a div, right? But now you can return sort of
just a container, an unnamed container.
Yeah, because that doesn't a fragment. That's right.
Okay.
A fragment, and the thing about a fragment is it doesn't render into any HTML, whereas a div would actually render as a div.
Right.
Whereas this only renders its contents. So I think what we're going to have here is a div which has, let's call that our
conversation story. Sorry.
Well, so I was imagining we're going to have, just to begin where we have 2 boxes, right?
Yeah.
We're going to have a box at the top, which is going to have all the stuff that we've been saying, and then a little line at the bottom where is your UI, right?
Right.
Which in our placeholder is going to be where you type in your prompts.
Right.
And then as stuff happens, it will scroll up in the top.
Right.
So this could be history. It could be conversation.
Conversation. Yeah.
Conversation. Okay. And we'll say the history of our conversation goes here. And then we'll need another div for our interaction, prompts. What do we want to call that? Thanks, Luigi and Charlie. No, I don't think it's changed. I just forgot about it.
Uh, let's go with interaction or interactions. Okay. I guess it's singular, so interaction. It's not a great name, but I don't like prompt because that already has overloaded
I don't
meaning.
like it either. And Charlie and Suiji both mentioned in the chat that our leaky abstraction has already raised its ugly head.
Okay.
In that you cannot use class for some reason. And
is it a reserved word or something?
I think I'm not sure what it is. There's something you know what it is the early versions of React didn't use functions, it used classes.
Oh. Well, there you go.
Yeah. And the newer version is actually quite nice, although it now has even more leaky abstractions because with a class, you can have class state, right? Mm-hmm. But with a function, functions don't have state unless you do some funky magic, right, which React does do. Mm-hmm. Okay. So that's working.
All right. Ship it.
Bigger for folks. I think it's beautiful. I think people will pay money for this game. I think we can ship it.
Yes, our customer has approved. Ship
it. One thing I've noticed about customers is they do not really appreciate those sorts of jokes.
Maybe that should be added to your vetting list. Make sure they get the jokes.
Yeah. Charlie.
0 out of 10. Wow, 0 out of 10. Not even a 1 out of 10. Wow.
I think what we should do is this is really going to be a text area.
I was just going to say that's going to be our input.
What would you like to say to your robot overlord? And then a nice big text area.
For some definition of big.
For whatever the default of definition of big is.
Yeah.
And foobar. Oh, and I guess we'll need a submit.
We will need some kind of, yes.
Okay, so we'll need a button. And we can put that in a paragraph. I guess paragraphs don't work the way I thought they did.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, there we go.
Once you start getting going on the HTML, you can start fiddling with it forever.
Yes. Try to ignore layout at this stage.
Yeah. But I do think we should put a horizontal rule in.
Yeah, that's right, Charlie. What? It's not in a form.
That's actually a good point. It should actually be in a form.
Yeah, the interaction should be a form. Yeah.
Perfect. Beautiful.
All right.
I think we've actually finished that.
For some definition of placeholder, we certainly have.
We have a placeholder, yeah. Yes. So we have hard-coded a UI mockup. And have a note here that we want to convert it to React components, but I actually think that's premature. I don't think we need to do React components until we know, which components need to do what. So I think I can check this in, say front-end mockup placeholder is done. Do you agree with that?
I definitely agree with that.
Okay. Create minimal front-end placeholder. And then we can remove the hello component.
Oh, that's right. Now that we have other stuff there.
So I can, you know what? I'm not going to remove it yet because it has the test, and we were going to want to use this test.
That's fair.
So we'll save that for later. But I think we might have finished this placeholder web page story.
Since we defined what it was, I think we can call it done.
Yeah, I mean, normally we would talk to our customer and say, and at this point they might be, well, can we make it a little prettier? And there would start to be some stuff happening here. But I don't think we're going to worry too much about that on stream. We might do some prettification off stream.
Yeah.
But all right, I think that's good. And you know what we forgot to do? We should have integrated after we finished the back end stuff, because that was a nice stable chunk of work we have here. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to reset Bash. I'm going to run all of our tests. And I'm glad I did, because I forgot we hadn't done that.
Disabled if we're going to do that.
And then should we, I think I'm going to put in our engineering tasks, we also need to move manual test.
Yep. I was just going to tell you that. Yeah, because that'll require a couple of changes to the default runner.
We'll probably do that off stream as well, right?
Yeah.
So integration-wise, what we've done is we have finished the OpenAI client, the initial AI client. Right.
We give it a prompt, we get a response. Done.
That's what we said we needed to do.
Yeah.
And this is why I want to integrate the Java, the backend stuff into the integration, so that all that just go. And we can pop our stash. And we have a merge conflict. It's just using that message for the merge commit, Suiji. So if we look at what this looks like, you can see that it does because there's only the two of us, it makes for a very nice, clean history where then integrate commit. So the message just gets put at the end of integrate here. So what we've done, what did we say this was? This was
placeholder web page.
Placeholder front-end. I think we can integrate that as well because we finished the story.
We did finish the story, so we can integrate, yes.
I'm just going to use the same name again. All right. I think that's it for us today.
Yep.
Thoughts?
Has it actually shipped anywhere yet? Yes, it's shipped to the source code repo as soon as he pushes it later.
Yeah. And we don't have plans to actually deploy this onto any sort of site because it does cost money for OpenAI. So if people want to run it, they'll just have to download the code and do it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, since it should be straightforward to run, you'll just probably at some point we'll make it more easily configurable for the API key, but then it should be pretty straightforward.
Yeah. But I don't think we're ever planning to put it up on an actual web server, are we?
I might.
Because you can't configure it with a spending limit?
Yeah, because I can say, yeah, sorry, we've used up the $5 for this month. Wait until next month. Yeah.
Subscribe to me on Twitch.
Maybe. For each subscription, it goes for another day.
Yeah.
Or hour or minute, whatever.
Yeah. Suiji, the for reals version of this continuous integration approach is each stream of work, not each task, but each active developer or pair or ensemble would have their own branch, and they would integrate when they were done with that work. But being done isn't like feature branching where you go until the feature's done. It's when you literally get up from the computer at the end of the day or at lunchtime or whatever, integrate.
Right.
And keep those integrations really small.
Yeah.
And I actually have a script for this in the book. Ta-da! Let me do my Vanna impression. In the book, in the continuous integration practice, there's a script that will do what I'm doing here, and actually a little more than what I'm doing because I don't have it configured to support multiple simultaneous branches at this point.
Right.
It's not hard. It's just not necessary.
Didn't need it.
Yeah. So yeah. Final thoughts, Ted?
It was nice to see it actually to finish up the OpenAI client and detect the problem that we'll fix offline. But nice to kind of have that done and move on to the front end. And there's always that balance of what would we do if we were working for real versus what we do on stream. And so there's
I always find that a little bit awkward because there is stuff that is tedious and somewhat just unenjoyable that I do in my real world work that I don't want to do on stream.
Yeah. It's like you're going to do it and you need to do it. It's just it is not the most interesting thing to watch, and so we're trying to somewhat optimize for that. So
and I have done that kind of work in the past on stream, and it can go on a long time. Like it can take up a lot of time.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I really enjoyed having the fact that OpenAI client is basically done. I think sort of the nitty gritty that we've been doing down in JSON HTTP client has been kind of hard for some people to watch, especially those who aren't familiar with what we're doing with the Nullables and all the details of Spring. So it's just neat to see even this crappy little placeholder. It's neat to see the placeholder working.
Yeah.
And start getting some of that iteration going. And I think next time, I think we're a little ways from getting to the game, but next time we'll start looking at how are we going to communicate from the client to the server.
Right. So making the front end to back end connection will be the next step. Yeah.
And that's going to have some difficulty associated with it because right now I'm just doing a serve with a little HTTP server, but we actually need the code to be served from Swing, which we haven't talked about or figured out yet.
Yeah, there's options, and we'll have to talk about what what those options are, because it doesn't necessarily have to be served up by Spring, but then who serves it, their trade-offs, and we can figure that out and talk about that. But yeah, that's going to be also mucking around in some of that stuff. We'll be.
I have to admit, I'm not looking forward to
to
diving into the guts of Spring. I've never enjoyed when we've had to do that. And we're also going to have to do the fetch, a nullable fetch, which I have not done. I've only done Node.js HTTP client. I've not yet done a browser HTTP client.
Okay, well, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. And so we get got our work cut out for us before we get this walking skeleton actually up on its feet. But it's nice to see the progress.
Yeah, and the other thing is sort of about, we spent time sort of fixing that error message because we were not happy about sort of being surprised or unclear about what was going on. And it would
the time spent debugging it.
Yes, and I was going to say it's one of those. I sort of liken it to insurance. Like, sure, you could skip it, and then take the risk that you'll never encounter it again. Versus you will encounter it again, and you will then spend a lot more time because you won't have just been dealing with it. You'll be months away from having even thought about the stuff at that level, and you'll be very confused for possibly hours. And boy, you would have wished you spent the 20 minutes, half an hour to do that work up front. But I also you want to take that risk, okay, then acknowledge it. And it is taking on risk.
I'm really happy we did that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and that's something that in my TDD game I sort of bring out, is this idea of, look, you can do it, but you're taking on risk, and you may pay for it now, or you may pay for it later. So yeah.
My experience is that you always pay for it later. Like it's not a risk, it's just a deferred cost. It's that technical debt metaphor, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm really happy we did that, because I think that's a good example of what you see from experienced developers. When you find, some people call them paper cuts, some people call it friction, but when you find these things, it didn't take us very long. I don't know, half an hour, and we chat, so we're not the fastest.
Right.
It's definitely not as fast as if we were doing real work rather than streaming. I think we'd be more heads down rather than chatting with each other and with chat. So it takes a fairly small amount of time to really clean these things up, and that, when you multiply that times the thousands of little things that you get in a code base, that kind of attention to detail, that is absolutely crucial for quality.
Yeah.
Right? I'm so happy we did that, because I think that really makes the difference between a quality code base and a crappy code base.
I 100% agree. Yeah. And it can, the reason why I call it insurance is because, like, you're paying now and you don't see the return immediately. But you certainly, you pay me now or pay me lots more later. And like you said, it's like experienced developers, they've experienced the oh crap, I should have done this before. I now regret not having done that. And that's how you learn. So,
and it was relatively easy for us to figure out now when it was all fresh in our head.
Exactly.
But
rather than have to now, in the future, as I said, like, being that distance means that, like, and especially with the generics, right? Oh my God.
Right.
Like, so it's not just sort of we've forgotten it. It's also in an area that actually is kind of has sharp edges and is not the most straightforward.
Yeah. In the future, when we've got a lot more classes, a lot more abstractions, and we've got the fact that this seems to sort of lazily resolve, we could have had that class cast error show up in a completely unrelated part of the system and spent a long time trying to track it down.
Yeah.
I think that actually was the most important thing we did today, is discovering that and fixing it. Yeah. And I think it was Suiji who actually suggested that we fix it. So thanks for you to you for that, Suiji.
Yeah, that was it's one of those. It was good work. It doesn't show up anywhere to the customer.
Yeah.
And
that's why planning and extreme programming, and I would like to say agile, but agile doesn't mean anything anymore. That's why planning and extreme programming is not the programmers do what the customer says, or the programmer does what the Scrum Master says, or the programmers do what the product owner says.
Right.
That's why it's a collaboration.
Yeah.
The engineer's job is to minimize costs, and the customer's job is to maximize value. And you get the best results when you maximize value and minimize cost.
Mm-hmm.
And best results when we don't have strong distinctions between customer and engineer, and that everybody's trying to think about all these things. But to simplify, it's not just the value and it's not just the cost. It's got to be both.
Yeah. 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 Because otherwise, and we've seen this happen, it's just you optimize for value, and never pay the price for that. And then it's like, why is everything taking so long?
It's so common for me to see these days organizations which have gone, the pendulum has swung too far. I mean, it used to be I didn't see product managers anywhere, and teams really suffered for that. And now I see product managers everywhere, at least people with that title or a product owner title, often not good product manager thinking.
Right.
And they think their job, they're basically renamed project managers, and they think their job is to tell the programmers what to do.
Right.
And that often includes a lot of butting of heads around, hey, we need to do a good job. And no, you just need to do what I say that we do. You should do.
Which one would you like?
Yeah.
Pick one.
And that's a real problem.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. But it seems, I mean, it's just human nature, I think, to want to have hierarchy. Either the engineers are in charge or the product folks are in charge. No, it's got to be a collaboration.
Well, that goes back to what we started out with. It's like it's a collaboration, a community of not just the developers. It's everyone, because otherwise you do have someone who's disconnected, and if they're the product owner or product manager or whatever you want to call them, and they're sort of in charge, then who wants to work on that? Maybe you have a good team, but we're all like, why are we even doing this? We really need to do this other thing. Yeah.
Yep. And it is hard to be motivated when you work on something that you know is bullshit.
Yep. Yep.
Or when you can't be proud of your work. And it takes more than just selling a lot of copies to be proud of your work as an engineer. You also need to be able to do things like what we've done.
Yeah. The pride. I mean, that comes to the pride of workmanship, of pride of what we produce. Like, most people want to do a good job. And when we break that, right, that goes back to what we were saying earlier. Then.
Yeah, well, nice callback. That makes us look like we actually planned this.
Oh, totally. You're not supposed to say that.
Oh, I mean, as
planned.
As we planned. That was beautiful. It brings a tear to my eye. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
You wasted another 3 hours. As they say
you utilized the 3 hours really well. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you for maximizing your utilization function, fellow meat puppets. So
all right, then that's all, folks. So you can catch the recording if you missed it, or you're already catching the recording. And as always, yes, thanks Ouija and Charlie Pancakes. And I know Xproof, you asked something that was sort of unrelated, so sorry we didn't get to it. But you know where to find us, or you can try again next time. Otherwise, we will see you next week.
Yeah, same bat time, same bat channel. See you then.
All right, bye.